So I was at this dinner party the other night, and British politics comes up, which, by the way, is probably the fastest way to ruin a perfectly good risotto. And eventually someone mentions the House of Lords. You can probably guess the reaction.
Oh, I can imagine. A lot of eye rolling. Someone probably shouted about unelected bureaucrats.
Immediately. Yeah. A retirement home for cronies.
Yeah.
An affront to democracy. You know, the usual greatest hits.
Right.
And look, I get it. The optics of red robes and, gold thrones in the 21st century are, well, they're challenging, let's say.
Uh-huh.
But then I read this stack of research you sent over, and it's arguing something that feels almost, I don't know, counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's claiming that if we stop obsessing over the ethics of the lords for just a second.
Just put it in a box for a minute.
Yeah, put the democracy argument aside. We find out the place has accidentally picked up a job that is totally vital. Like vital to the country not completely falling apart.
Right. And accidentally is the key word there. It really is. Nobody planned this. I mean, if you were designing a modern democracy from scratch on a whiteboard, you would never, ever draw the House of Lords.
No way.
But the argument in these sources is that the Lords has evolved. It's developed this specific mechanical function that the House of Commons is, well, structurally incapable of doing.
You're calling it the place where long experience goes to sit, which I have to say sounds like a very polite way of saying an old folks' home.
Yeah.
Be honest, is this just a big defense of gerontocracy?
It sounds like that, doesn't it? But think of it less as a retirement home and more like a reservoir. The core idea we're looking at here is all about time frames. It's about a fundamental mismatch between the speed that politics operates at and the speed that the actual machinery of the state operates at. The Lords, by just a sheer accident of its weird membership, kind of fills the gap between those two speeds.
Okay, let's drill into that. This mismatch. You've got short politics and long systems. I'm assuming short politics is the House of Commons.
Precisely. Just think about the life cycle of a member of parliament or a minister. It's incredibly short. I mean, elections happen every 4 or 5 years, but the churn inside government is much, much faster.
Oh, absolutely. I swear we have a new housing minister every time I go to the grocery store.
And that's barely an exaggeration. In some departments, the average time a Secretary of State is in the job is, something like 18 months?
18 months, wow.
So put yourself in their shoes. You've got 18 months to make a mark. You need a headline, a quick win. You have to be seen to be doing something new. Yeah. The whole incentive structure is built around disruption, announcing new things, passing new laws. It's a fast-twitch environment.
It's like a CEO who knows they're getting fired in a year. They're not going to invest in some 10-year R&D project.
Of course not.
They're going to slash costs, boost the quarterly earnings, and get out.
And that is a completely rational response to the system they're in. We can't blame them for it, but now look at the thing they're actually in charge of. Look at the long systems. The National Health Service, the Ministry of Defense procurement pipelines, the court system, the national grid. These are not speedboats. They're super tankers.
You can't just pivot the entire NHS on a Tuesday because the manifesto changed.
It's more than just the size. It's about sediment. That's the word the source uses. These systems have been running for decades, some for centuries. They've accumulated layers and layers of rules, software patches, workarounds, cultural habits.
It's like a massive ancient computer code base.
Go on.
Where there's some line of code from 1985 that nobody understands. But if you dare delete it, the whole payroll system crashes.
That is the perfect analogy. And the mismatch is this. You have a short politics minister who has probably never even worked in that system.
Right.
Grabbing the keyboard and trying to rewrite the code to hit some political deadline. They don't know about that line of code from 1985. They don't know why the minister from 10 years ago made that weird compromise. They just see a problem and, legislate a solution.
So it's not that they're stupid or incompetent. It's that they lack the contextual history of the machine they're trying to operate.
And that gap, the knowledge gap, is where disasters happen. That's where you get laws that look fantastic on a campaign leaflet but cause absolute chaos when they actually hit the floor of a hospital or a police station. Because the reality of the system is just so much messier than the theory of the policy.
Okay, so we have this dangerous gap between the sprinters in the commons and the marathon runners in the civil service. And your argument is that the House of Lords, this room full of appointed peers, is the bridge.
It's the memory bank. Let's look at who actually ends up in the Lords. We're not talking about hereditary peers. That's a whole other thing.
Okay.
We're talking about the life peers. Who are they?
Well, the stereotype is, political donors and former MPs who need a soft landing.
And there's plenty of that for sure. But look at the others. You have former cabinet secretaries, the actual people who ran the civil service, former chiefs of the defense staff, retired Supreme Court justices, former heads of MI5, leaders of major charities, people who ran NHS trusts.
The people who survived the sediment.
They're the people who created the sediment, or at least
Yeah.
they were there when the decisions were made. When a minister in the Commons says, we need to reform defense procurement, the Commons cheers. But in the Lords, you've got the former chief of defense staff sitting there thinking, we tried that exact same reform in 1998.
Right.
And it resulted in us having helicopters that couldn't fly in cloudy weather. And here is why.
So they are literally the institutional memory.
Yes. And this is crucial. Institutional memory isn't just being smart. It's knowing where the bodies are buried. It's remembering the failures. In politics, everyone wants to forget the failures. In a long system, remembering failures is the only way you avoid repeating them.
I want to picture this because the atmosphere must be important. I mean, I've watched Prime Minister's questions. It's a bear pit. It's shouting, jeering, pure political theater. Is the Lord's just a quieter version of that?
It's culturally the opposite. I mean, if you walk from the Commons chamber to the Lord's chamber, the volume drops by, 80 decibels. There's no cheering. There's very little grandstanding for the cameras. It feels more like a university seminar or a board meeting of a very, very old company.
Which I assume changes how they handle legislation.
Completely. In the Commons, the debate is almost always about the principle of a bill. Are we tough on crime? Do we support the workers? High-level ideological stuff. By the time that bill gets to the Lords, the ideological battle is usually over. The government has its majority, the law is going to pass, so the Lord switches into reality-checking mode.
Reality checking. Okay, distinguish that for me from blocking. Because if they just started blocking laws they didn't like, we'd have a constitutional crisis on our hands, wouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And they know they can't defy the elected will of the Commons, so they don't say no. Instead, they say how.
Can you give me a concrete example? Like, paint the scene of a reality check.
Okay, sure. Let's take a hypothetical sentencing bill. The Commons passes a Tough on Crime Act. It mandates longer sentences for a specific set of offenses. The politics are simple. Voters want safety. MPs vote for longer sentences. Done.
Sounds pretty standard.
But then it goes to the Lords. And you'll have a former Lord Chief Justice or maybe a former head of the prison service stand up. They don't argue about whether the sentences should be longer. They look at Clause 4 and they say, this clause requires these prisoners to be held in Category A prisons. We currently have absolutely zero capacity in Category A prisons. If you pass this law on Tuesday, by Wednesday, prison governors will be legally breaking the law because they'll have nowhere to put these people.
That's the detail the minister missed because he was focused on the press release.
Exactly. Or someone else points out, this new sentencing rule completely contradicts the Evidence Act of 2003, so you're going to have appeals clogging up the Court of Appeal for the next 5 years.
These are what the source calls second-order effects.
Yes. The first-order effect is the intent. Criminals go to jail. The second-order effect is the mechanical consequence. The court IT system crashes, or the probation service collapses under the new caseload. The Commons is obsessed with first-order effects. The Lords is almost entirely focused on second-order effects.
It sounds less like a legislative chamber and more like a quality assurance department, like they're spell-checking the logic of the law.
That's a great way to put it. A logic checker for the state. And the source points out that because this happens so quietly, it's usually done through amendments that the government just quietly accepts. Nobody ever notices. It doesn't make the news. The headline is never, House of Lords fixes drafting error in Clause 14.
Yeah.
But that little fix might have saved the government millions of pounds and prevented a massive public scandal.
So on the surface, this sounds great. We have a chamber of experts fixing the mistakes of the amateurs. But I feel like we're glossing over the accidental part of all this. Because you said earlier, nobody designed it this way.
And that is the massive, glaring flaw in this whole arrangement, the luck factor.
Because we don't curate these experts, do we? We just sort of hope they show up.
It's entirely haphazard. We have a lot of lawyers because lawyers tend to end up in the Lords. We have a fair number of defense and security people. But what about the new long system?
You mean things like, what, technology, AI, bioethics?
Exactly. If the Commons passes a bill to regulate artificial intelligence or cryptocurrency, Who is the institutional memory for that in the Lords?
Probably nobody. Or maybe a guy who was the Minister for Technology back in 1994, which isn't exactly helpful for ChatGPT.
And that's the danger. We are relying on the attic of the Constitution to just happen to have the right tools in it. But an attic is full of old stuff. It might have a great set of tools for fixing a steam engine, but it might have absolutely nothing for fixing a quantum computer.
That is a terrifying thought.
Ah.
The reality check only works if the reality checker actually understands the current reality.
And there's no audit. There's no HR department for the House of Lords saying, you know what, we're a bit low on cybersecurity experts. Let's go recruit 3. It depends entirely on the patronage of the Prime Minister of the day. If a PM doesn't care about science, you don't get scientists in the Lords. Simple as that.
So we have this vital function, this critical safety valve for our democracy that is running on pure luck. It's that quote from the source. It works tolerably well when you're lucky. It works badly when you're not.
And there's another risk, which is the fading memory. You mentioned the retirement home aspect earlier. The problem with memory stored in human brains is that humans retire, and eventually they die.
The knowledge just walks out the door.
Or it just gets out of date. If you have a brilliant expert on nuclear energy who was appointed in 2005, well, by 2025, their knowledge is 20 years old. But they're still there, potentially voting on energy policy. The reservoir can become stagnant.
And this brings us right back to the optics problem, doesn't it? Because even if they're doing a good job, even if they catch that sentencing error, it's so hard to sell this to the public. Trust us, these unelected people know better than the people you voted for. It sounds incredibly elitist.
It is elitist, by definition. It is valuing expertise and experience over a direct democratic mandate. And in a populist era, that is a very hard sell.
So where does that leave us? Because the source seems to be saying the House of Lords is indefensible in theory, but indispensable in practice.
It leaves us with a challenge. The source argues that we need to separate the function from the form. We have to recognize that reality checking and institutional memory are vital functions. We can't run a complex modern state with only short politics. If we do, we will just break things faster and faster.
So if we were to reform the Lords, which everyone is always saying they want to do, we have to be really careful not to accidentally delete the memory bank.
Exactly. If you replace the Lords with, say, an elected Senate, another chamber of politicians on 5-year terms, you would satisfy the democracy argument. It would look fairer, but you'd lose the mechanical function. You'd just end up with 2 speedboats and no supertanker. You'd have 2 groups of people looking for headlines and nobody checking the IT contract.
That's the old Chesterton's fence idea, isn't it? Don't tear down a fence until you know exactly why it was put there in the first place.
Or in this case, don't tear down the weird, dusty old attic until you figure out where else you're going to store the blueprints for the house.
So the provocation here is, could we design a chamber of memory on purpose instead of just inheriting one by accident?
Imagine that. Imagine a second chamber that was specifically structured to represent the long systems. Not chosen by voters, maybe, but not chosen by prime ministers either. Maybe chosen by the professions, by the sectors themselves. A chamber of engineers and doctors and judges and scientists, all on long, fixed terms, specifically mandated to ask the question, does this actually work?
A house of reality instead of a House of Lords.
It changes the conversation completely, doesn't it? It stops being about aristocracy versus the people, and it starts being about competence versus chaos.
And in a world that is just getting more complex, more technical, and faster moving all the time, maybe competence needs a room of its own.
We can't afford to run the state on luck anymore. The systems are just too big. The stakes are far too high.
Well, there is a thought to chew on.
Yeah.
We usually complain that politics is too slow, but maybe the real problem is that the important parts aren't slow enough.
Or at least they're not deep enough.
We'll leave it there. A defense of the indefensible, or maybe a blueprint for the future. We'll let you decide. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.